If you want to do something badly enough, then you create space to do that.
Yeah.
I've always been ambitious. I've always been pretty focused on money. There's something actually really positive about being naive and setting up a business.
Sure.
Sales felt very masculine. I didn't feel like I was a salesperson. I didn't like the term. It felt dirty. I was really skint at that point. I didn't have any money to go and do all these things. So I worked really, really hard. I worked ridiculous hours. I worked every day. Alongside that, to be able to move things forward at some level of pace, you've got to make those brave moves, because otherwise things just carry on as they were. It was only when it was just me that I was able to make those decisions. I was really naive. They took advantage of the fact that I'd never done this before. All the stuff that I was promised just didn't happen. There'd been a few red flags that I just ignored. I'd go into a boardroom, I'd be the only woman with like 10 old white blokes. Not a fan of just wallowing or letting things get worse. You had to be the first one in the office and the last one to leave.
Yeah.
It was all about how much money can we squeeze out of clients, which was not something that I like. His motivation all the way along was actually to buy the business, but he didn't tell me that. This whole thing was a plan.
Don't Work Harder is the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to catapult their business forward, because we believe it's not about working longer, harder or smarter, it's about those braver moments. One bold move is worth 1,000 small steps. So rather than those small incremental movements that are moving you forward at a much slower pace, we're going to share with you the stories of successful entrepreneurs who've taken those big, bold steps to move them forward. This show is brought to you by Atomic, and I'm your host, Simon Randauer, and I'm here not only to share with you the stories of entrepreneurs and the success that they've had, but you'll also walk away with the insights of what they did at that exact moment when they made that change that moved their business forward. Have we got something very special coming up for you? This next episode is an Atomicon special. This was filmed backstage at Atomicon earlier this year with some of our speakers and some of our guests. If you're interested in joining Atomicon next year, then head to our website. That's www.atomic.site, where you can be the first to see what keynote speakers we have and what breakout speakers we have, and grab your ticket. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Sophie Milliken MBE. She's the founder and CEO of Moja. She helps entrepreneurs and senior executives be more seen, be more visible, and create opportunities on the back of it. Alongside being a podcast host herself, she's also the 3 times author of a book. She's the chair of SmartWorks in Newcastle. She's an angel investor of ScoreApp, charity ambassador, and she also scaled and sold her first business. Oh, and did I mention she's also an MBE? I can't wait to speak to Sophie and find out more about how she brings it all to life and what her bravest moments have been. Hi, Sophie. Lovely to see you.
Good to be here.
Now, the last time we saw each other was in the glamorous streets of San Diego.
We're just so cool, aren't we?
We are, and now here we are in the glamorous streets of Newcastle. So thank you for having me here today. And this is not only an opportunity to speak to you about all that you have achieved, but we're also getting to be in your studios, which is a really nice tie-in. Now, Sophie, we're going to go through your story, but how we really like to start on the podcast is really think about where you are now. So as a little intro for everybody, not only are you an MBE, not only have you scaled a business and sold it, you are now the CEO and founder of Moja, which I know is all about helping senior execs and founders, become more visible. And I see the amount of work that you do as a speaker, as somebody who is involved at really high levels with multiple charities, including the chair of SmartWorks. The question that I ask myself is, how does she do it all?
I mean, what a question to start.
Let's go big. Let's
go big. So there's 2 things, I guess, with that. So one, I believe that if you want to do something enough, you will create the time to do it. So when I wrote my first book, I had only 3 weeks to write it for all sorts of reasons, and that felt quite daunting at the time. So I just decided to stop watching TV. Now, at that point, I was a soap addict. I used to love EastEnders, Coronation Street, the lot.
Oh, we can discuss Corrie. Yeah.
Well, I've never watched them since, because when I stopped watching them to get this book deadline done, I never went back to it. And I don't watch a huge amount of TV these days. Every so often I'll binge something, but I can go an entire week and not turn the TV carry on. So I think that if you want to do something badly enough, then you create space to do that. And then I think now as well, with tech the way it is, we have more of a work-life blend rather than a balance.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of that going on as well. And I think that just makes it all easier to do what seems like a lot of stuff. But as well, remember, I document quite a lot of stuff that I do online. So people always say to me when I'm out and about, God, you're everywhere, you're doing this, that, and the other. And actually, they're probably all doing really cool stuff as well. They just don't talk about it as much.
And of course, you're doing all of this. And in fact, I almost forgot to mention the other incredible role that you have, which is you're also a mum. Yeah. So you're doing all of this as a mother as well. So when we think about like the premise of what this podcast is about, which is don't work harder, work braver, how much have you had to kind of dig deep on that when you're also raising a family? And like you said, it sounds like something had to be given up in order for you to be more intentional with your business.
I do get a lot of mum guilt. It's something that I think most of us probably struggle with or suffer from at various times.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've learned works well for me is actually to include my daughter in as much stuff as I can do.
Okay.
So, for example, when I did my TEDx talk down in Birmingham, we got permission for her to finish school a bit early, and it was on a Saturday and we were going down on the Friday. So she finished school a bit early and we got the train down to Birmingham, and she loved it. She got to run around backstage with the camera crew, see what was going on. She was like the only kid with permission to be behind scenes.
Yeah.
So she loved that. There was a green room with a huge box of Mars bars in there. Loved that bit too much. But that opportunity to bring her and for her to see what was going on was really cool. And it was funny because it came at a time where we were kind of, the business was just becoming successful really at that point or that year. So we hadn't had a lot of fancy holidays and things like that in the run up to that point. So going to Birmingham felt like quite a big deal for her. And I remember planning holidays the next year and saying, where should we go? Oh, I really want to go back to Birmingham, Mum. I'm like, amazing. So
wow, cheap. Yeah.
We didn't go back to Birmingham, but yeah, how cool that she saw that trip as being so special. She still talks about going to Birmingham. So that is quite fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it was really impactful for her.
And she gets to do a lot of cool stuff. I think she doesn't quite realise how cool it is until someone points it out to her and points out that some of the stuff she's done is not that normal. But, with SmartWorks, the charity that I chair in Newcastle, she is a regular at that. So if anyone attends one of our events, they'll often be sold a strip of raffle tickets or two by Jess, because she's always trying to get involved with things like that. So I think that helps. And it goes back to this work-life blend thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously one of the reasons that we wanted to create this podcast is there's so many conversations about, work harder, work smarter, work faster even, but actually you talk about intentionality there. And I think the thing is, it's about working out what you want to put first. And that sometimes involves being incredibly brave. But I think one thing that I've noticed about going through your CV, your bio, there I was, trawling through LinkedIn, is it seems like, Sophie, you are very much about people. Like you've just talked about SmartWorks, and actually they're a charity I know because I volunteered for them as well, which was, another thing that we kind of were able to speak about in San Diego. But when I look at what you do, has people been a theme that has run throughout your kind of professional career?
Well, when I left uni, I got a place on the John Lewis graduate scheme. Okay. So it was the local graduate scheme here in Newcastle because I didn't want to go to London because I thought that was quite scary at the time. Yeah. I wanted to come back here. And at that point in time, John Lewis was very, very people focused. I think it's lost that a bit now. It's the business has changed a lot since I was there. But I really loved that about the business at that point. So you used to get loads of training and it was all about, looking after people and that sort of thing. And while I was there, I fell into a role within HR. So I had quite a long career sort of, with people. And I think I am genuinely interested in people. If I can, I will try and help people where possible. And I don't mean that in a a bit of a like cringy way, but quite often people will ask me if I can give them some advice about something or mentor them. And unfortunately now it's at a point where I could not say yes to all of those requests that I get, but where I can, I do want to encourage people. And I think there's something around when you have some level of influence in different ways, or some opportunities where you can help other people, especially as you get a bit older. It's just a good thing to do, and why would you not? And I'm really keen on supporting women in particular, and also people from the Northeast. So every time I get the opportunity to do that, I'm like, wanting to do it.
And with the theme of business, is that the theme of, like you said, I love helping people, and particularly in the Northeast?
I think so, because that's what I know. So it'd be easy to try and get involved in all sorts of different things, but you've got to play to your strengths a bit, really, haven't you? And work out where you can add value and where you can help people. And arguably with the charity side of things, that's not business. However, when I joined SmartWorks, they wanted someone that was commercial in the role of chair.
Right.
So although it's not a business, actually you have to, and actually run a charity in a really different way to a business. So when you run a business, you're trying to make lots of money and retain profit. When you have a charity, you're trying to spend it, which is really weird as a business person, because the more you spend of the income that you have, the more good that you're doing, right? So it's quite a different mindset. But where I've been able to add value at SmartWorks is being that I've got loads of connections and I can raise the profile of the charity.
Right. Okay.
Which, as you'll know, a big part of SmartWorks is that any woman that needs to use the service needs to know it exists.
Sure.
So I've been able to help with that, being able to, bring great people through onto the board, hire great people. So all of those things. So it's playing to those strengths.
We're going to take a short pause to hear from one of our sponsors. Sponsors help us make the best show possible. Don't Work Harder is sponsored by Constant Contact, the digital marketing platform built with small business owners in mind. With Constant Contact, you can grow your contacts list, send out more emails, organise social media and events, and simply get more done with their advanced automation tools. It's everything you need to grow your business, advance your automation, and attract more of the right customers all in one place. Visit constantcontact.com to get started. And you were talking there about business, and obviously this is what you are known for, and this is almost what's given you that platform to do all these other things. So your background, for those that don't know, was kind of several years in like learning and development and recruitment. Is that correct?
Yeah. So within John Lewis, I was at John Lewis for, it was like 12, 13 years. So it was a combination of being here in Newcastle and then down in London. I think I was in London probably a bit longer than I was in Newcastle.
Was it scary?
It was really funny, actually, because I laugh about that now because I spend so much time in London now. But I wish in hindsight I'd gone sooner, because I'd only ever been to London a couple of times in my life. I'm from Newcastle. I went to uni in Leeds. Leeds felt really scary coming from Newcastle. Leeds is a lot bigger than Newcastle. So the thought of going to London just felt really overwhelming at that point in time. And I laugh and smile now because, of course, I did then go there. And what I saw in London was just the scale of everything and the size of the opportunity that was there. So I did go when I think I was like 26-ish, 27. So hadn't yet got any major responsibilities. And I think that's the best time to go and do something like London or anywhere else. And it massively fast-tracked my career because there was just more opportunity there. And that's a brilliant thing, but also a frustrating thing, because then when I wanted to move back to Newcastle, I then found that there weren't the level of opportunities that I'd got used to at that pay scale and just in terms of being able to sort of climb that ladder a bit more. And that's how I ended up setting up the first business, because I didn't feel that I had those opportunities here. And that frustrates me a lot because I love Newcastle and I love the Northeast, and I hope that there will be more opportunities so people don't feel that way.
And I guess that's why you do so much, because you're wanting to put back into a city that means so much to you.
Newcastle, it's class.
I love Newcastle too. So, and that's obviously why we have Atomicon here, clearly. Sophie, so you saw the opportunity. Like what I'm hearing a lot from you is there's a lot of intentionality around what you have done throughout your career and your business career. So you recognise that the opportunities were limited or were not at quite the scale that you wanted. So you had the idea to set up your own business. Now, that business, you had it for 8 years before you sold it. Is that right, roughly speaking?
Yeah.
Talk to me about your mindset of when you went into setting up a business. What was the goal there?
Well, I look back and there was no goal. Right?
Okay.
So it was a case of I was moving back to the Northeast. There were no jobs at the level that I wanted to be at. I've always been ambitious. I've always been pretty focused on money, although I laugh about that now because I did this visualization manifestation exercise when I was in LA last month, and I'm not very woo-woo.
That's why I'm laughing. I'm sure you told me you're not woo, and here you are doing.
I'm not, but I got told to do it, and they were talking about if you made all the money that you want to make this year, what would you buy with it? And I just thought, do you know what? There's nothing that. I'd maybe do a bit more of stuff, like go on some more holidays or do some more stuff around the house. But actually, I think for me, although I'm motivated by money, it's more around being comfortable rather than being flash. I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, I do like nice things, but I wouldn't go nuts with that. So I feel like it's more for me around security and having the choice to make decisions about things. But at that point, moving back to the Northeast and looking at the jobs, I was on a really big salary with John Lewis in London.
Okay.
And I could not find jobs at that level in what I did, which was graduate recruitment at that point, in-house graduate recruitment.
Okay.
So it was a chance conversation. And this is why I laugh, because it was me and it was a guy who's from just outside Leeds who had a similar commute, because I was commuting from Newcastle to London for John Lewis at this point.
What, like at the weekends?
No. So I would do, I'd go down on the 5:25 in the morning on Monday.
Remember the time, okay?
I do remember the train, and we always have this train.
Who's going to forget a 5:25 train?
Oh,
right?
You didn't forget. I'm definitely a morning person. So I'd go down. I'd do all day Monday in the office, stay over, or do all day Tuesday in the office. Yeah. It was slightly longer days, and then I would head back home Tuesday night because I'd have my daughter at this point. Do Wednesday and Thursday from home, and then I'd be off on a Friday.
Right. Okay.
So it was quite intense, but because I wanted to make it work, and they had created that set up for me. It was way before compressed hours.
Yeah.
I thought it was ahead of its time in that sense, but my boss didn't want me to leave. And then there was a big restructure where they wanted me to move to Bracknell, and I just didn't want to do it. So look for jobs here. There wasn't anything that I felt was what I wanted to go into. It felt like it'd be a big step back, both responsibility-wise and financially. So it's a chance conversation with this guy that was doing the same commute, but from just outside of Leeds down to Canary Wharf. He worked for one of the banks. And we'd gone for lunch one day in York, and he was saying, I'm thinking about leaving the bank and setting up my own business. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm looking for a job back in Newcastle. And then I just said to him, well, would you consider doing it with me? And he was like, yeah. And
you were just train friends.
And well, we weren't train friends. We were both in this group that networked. It was like kind of a retail group, and he was retail banking.
Okay,
so we met through that. So we didn't know each other that well, but we did get on. And I laugh because he'd been at the bank for 20 years. I'd been at John Lewis for 12, 13 years. And it's just this chance conversation over lunch. And we literally set the business up sort of a couple of months later. So yeah, I look back and I think that was quite brave. And I think there's something actually really positive about being naive and setting up a business, because having done it a couple of times now, I know that it's really hard. And when you're first having a go, it just feels all like an adventure and it's all fun and all these things. And then it's the reality hits and you get this big roller coaster. So yeah, that's how it started.
And did you both have the same vision for where was it setting up a business with the intention to scale it and sell?
So we never spoke about that.
Okay.
And that was where it then kind of, we ended up going our separate ways. So it was actually quite a natural ending of that partnership. So there was no falling out. It was just quite a natural transition, because we had been going for maybe 2 or 3 years. And he used to always say to me, I think, this business will be great for one of us, and that will provide the level of income that we want, but it'll never get higher than a certain threshold. And I used to say, I think you're wrong. I think we could do so much more. And we just had different aspirations. And
so you had the vision for scale even then?
I did, but I didn't realise that's what it was.
Did you know the term?
No. And I didn't know anything. I literally didn't know anything. I didn't even know how to set up a business. I didn't know what kind of structure you needed to put in place, or processes and procedures and all these things. Literally did not have a clue. So he was great at that side of things. I was actually better around the vision and having the ideas, but we didn't really play to our strengths at the beginning. It was more around to circumstance, because I got divorced maybe 6 months into setting that business up.
Okay.
So then it became very hard for me to do the traveling that we needed to do for that business. So he would go out and do the sales and I would do the operations, and that is not that. It should have been the other way around, to play to our strengths. But I didn't realize that at the time, because, and actually you'll probably really understand my hesitation on this, in that I felt like sales was really scary.
And I understand, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So sales felt very masculine. It felt very, I mean, this,
we're still talking about a little while ago as well. Yeah.
It felt very uncomfortable for me. I didn't feel like I was a salesperson. I didn't like the term. It felt dirty.
And is that why you ended up in operations, also because you didn't have to do the traveling?
Part of that, but it was mostly around the travel,
so
to be fair.
Practical
but
side
I just thought, I won't be good at that.
Okay.
But actually the reality was, because I really believed in what we did, actually I was really, really good at it. And that came to be the case when he left, because he decided, it is a business for one of us, and he was prepared to step back. So we just naturally he finished 1 year at the end of our financial year, and then I had the business from that point. But we used to have contracts that we'd get for sort of a year at a time.
Yeah.
So the point where he left, literally had an empty order book. There was nothing in it because of the timing of the year.
Interesting.
So I had that moment of thinking, do I go and get a job? Because I've become a single parent at this point. So I'm like, do I go and get a job, provide some level of stability, at least a level of stability financially, or do I go for it? And I thought, I'm going to go for it. And literally 6 weeks I had going out to see existing clients, prospects, and I got about 200 grand's worth of business in those 6 weeks, which was quite a lot.
The very thing that you'd been avoiding was the very thing you were brilliant at.
Yeah. But I didn't know that until that point.
So Sophie, when we look at that moment, and obviously, I know we've got so many other things to speak about, which I can't wait to do, but I think this is just really interesting, because there's that expression, your back was against the wall.
Yeah.
You needed to make a decision, which was, do I go back and go and find myself a job? You also were thinking about security. You've just said at this point you're going through a divorce. What did you have to do to get yourself to the point where you were determined to make that business work? And as you said, you went out and got 200K's worth of prospects. Where did you need to go mentally, I suppose?
I think that the divorce, although it was very unpleasant, and I was the first person in my friendship group to get divorced as well, which is
never easy, is it?
First person in my family, like it wasn't.
I've been there, Sophie.
It's not fun, is it?
It's not fun.
It's not fun, and at this point, I've got a daughter who's 2, and I find parenting quite hard. I'm not a natural parent. I was reading everything. What do I do here and everything? So that was quite hard. But I knew the business would be successful. So that was at the core of everything. I think I knew.
And how did you know that?
I just knew. I knew we had quite a USP around running large scale assessment centre simulations for unis, and no one was doing that at that point. So I knew we had something that
could specialist skill set.
Yeah,
and there were people with that problem.
100%.
Okay,
so I knew that was one thing, but also I had this belief that, I had this understanding that if I went to get a job, I'd have to compromise, because I knew what the landscape was work-wise.
You'd come from that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I knew that. I also thought it takes time with an employer to build up flexibility opportunities, especially back then. It's a little bit better now, I think, since the pandemic. But, there was no kind of automatic right to home working or any of this flexibility that we see now. So I thought, it'll take me a while. If I go and get a job, I'm going to get paid less. I'm going to have to work set hours and not have the flexibility to parent. So the way I saw it was, I can really go for it with this business, and it presents a lot more opportunities overall, because there's no cap on how much money you can make when you work for yourself.
Of course.
In theory. I could diary things that were important and make sure that I could go to them, in the nativity play and all those things. I could make sure that I would have that time in my diary. And ultimately, I thought it would give me more flexibility as well. So I probably, looking back, had some kind of time limit on, right, I'll give it a go for a year or something, but I can't remember that. But the other thing was the timing of the divorce was I was really skint at that point because we weren't making tons of money at that point. So I didn't have any savings either because we'd had to sort of split things in the divorce. I'd put some money into the house to try and keep the house and all sorts of things. So I didn't have a huge amount of cash. So my thinking at that point was just work really hard because the 2-year-old, they're asleep quite a bit. So, she'd go to bed at 6:30 or whatever after CBeebies nighttime hour and things. And then I'd be stuck in the house because I didn't have any childcare. Like my parents would help me with childcare for work. So if I was at home, then I was at home. So I didn't have any money to go and do all these things. So I just worked. I worked really, really hard. I worked ridiculous hours. I worked every day. I mean, I still work ridiculous hours, but it was for something good. It was to create that stability, that security, and the flexibility that I wanted.
And what did that time teach you about working hard versus taking bold, brave moves?
I think you need both. So I think there's a lot of stuff, isn't there, online at the moment around, hey, let's just do a 4-day week from the beach and all this kind of
it would be nice,
get rich quick stuff. And you often as well see very successful people saying, don't burn out, don't do this. However, they've all worked really hard to get to that point. And I prefer listening to the ones that say, look, if you want this, you do have to put the hours in. It's the same with everything. You've got to put the hours in. And I think with some jobs, with some businesses, once you've done that for long enough to achieve a certain level of success, you can then ease off a little bit or choose things. But, the most successful people I know are workaholics. Like that is just how it is. But alongside that, to be able to move things forward at some level of pace, you've got to make those brave moves because otherwise things just carry on as they were. And, when I look back to when I set that first business up with my business partner, he was very steady.
Right.
So there were no brave moves going on at that point. It was only when it was just me that I was able to make those decisions and do things that he would never have agreed to, because you have to do those and take some risks to move things on.
And you obviously took that business to a point where you eventually sold it.
Yeah.
What were the key time periods then that took you from the person who was like, my back's against the wall, if I'm going to make this business survive, then I need to go out and win some business. And you did, and you just shared the 200K that you won in contracts that was going to take you through the year. How did you get from there to being at a point where you were able to sell your business?
So a couple of things. So we started winning big contracts that were worth that on the
Sophie, you say we. Was there
I had a team at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
So when my business partner left, it was literally me and we had some associates.
Okay.
So I moved quite quickly to employ some excellent people.
Okay.
So we had to
still work with you now.
Still work with you now.
Yeah.
So we had to make some good hires. So we ended up with a permanent team, and then we expanded the associate team as well.
How quickly did you do that from when the business
really
was split?
quickly? It was within a year. It was significantly bigger within that year because I was winning those bigger contracts. So, big 6-figure contracts with universities, and we had several of those. So that started just giving us a bit of momentum, and we had a decent margin on those as well because of the way that we deployed associates. So we'd run days where we needed maybe 40 or 50 associates on one day, but we'd only have a few of those a year. So it wouldn't have made sense to obviously hire all of those people permanently, but we had great relationships with them where we knew they would do the dates that we needed. So that worked really well. And then it was still felt back against the wall kind of vibes, even though we were making good money. Every year I would panic that, we're not going to get the next contract, they're not going to renew. And I look back and I feel a bit sad because we always renewed the contracts. Like, we never lost the contract. And
Amazing.
I wish I'd had more confidence to go, right, it'll be fine. They'll renew it. They'll renew it. And then I never planned to sell that business. I got approached by this guy who'd seen me on LinkedIn and who wanted, he was very open in saying he wanted the credibility that I brought to him, because I was well known. I had really good relationships with really big graduate employers and with the universities, and him and his business partner were running a tech business. Essentially, it was a jobs board at this point over in Manchester, and they were sort of seen as, you know, these are kind of young upstarts, and they didn't have that credibility or those connections that I had. So this one guy in particular was very clever in that he approached me to do some joint events.
Okay.
Which we did.
So he got to know you first, and you got to know him.
Yeah, and really his motivation all the way along was actually to buy the business, but he didn't tell me that until we were a bit sort of 6 months into that. And then over a period of time, I kept sort of buttering me up to sell the business, and he came to Newcastle one day and said, I've been thinking, and I get frustrated now telling the story, because he knew this all the way through, right? This whole thing was a plan, right? And he said, I think we should merge the businesses. I'm like, well, what does that look like? And then he presented this idea that was basically him buying the business. I was like, okay, right. And then bearing in mind that I'd come from this kind of scarcity mindset around, oh, are we going to get the next deal? I'd only just started paying myself quite a good wage at that point. So I'd paid some money back because I had to borrow some money from my parents during the divorce. So it was all these things. And I saw an opportunity, and I thought I'd be mad not to take it. But then as it came closer to the date of actually selling, there'd been a few red flags that I just ignored around the investors that were, you know, putting the money into the deal. I'd go into a boardroom, I'd be the only woman with like 10 old white blokes, and it felt very patronizing. I was really naive. I would do it so differently this time. So they took advantage of the fact that I'd never done this before. I didn't know what was expected. The fact that the deal took so long, it should have been much higher value, because we'd won all these contracts again. And they kept saying to me, oh, but you don't know whether you're going to win that contract. Because I'd be so honest about them, about the fact that was how it operated from year to year. We didn't know whether we'd get them. So they used to kind of use that against me. So, but I did have that thought, you know, what if we don't get it? What if I've got to take the opportunity while the money's on the table, essentially. So yeah, it took ages for the deal to go through. I nearly pulled out a couple of weeks before, didn't, because I felt like I'd agreed to do it. And I'm very values driven.
I'm so invested in this story, by the way, Sophie. Gosh.
Well, so anyway, I did the deal, and it was very frustrating, because all the stuff that I was promised just didn't happen again and again and again. And this was September 2019, right? So quite quickly we hit what was our peak delivery period. So it was a busy time for my part of the business. And I was still MD of that business, and then working at a more senior level with this supposed group of businesses. And then we hit COVID pretty quick after that. And bear in mind that their office was based in Manchester. We were in Newcastle. There was an office in London. And then the group acquired a business that was in Sheffield around that year anyway. So there was lots of people in different places. You didn't see everyone all the time. COVID massively changed things, because actually their side of the business, Jobs Board, there was just no work for them. So it was actually our business that kept the group going, because what I did was realize very quickly that we needed to pivot to online, because we were running huge, large scale in-person assessment centres in football stadiums.
But they were all in person.
All in person. So I knew...
The business had been sold at this time, but you're still the MD of the business.
Yeah,
okay.
Still running it. And I knew that we needed to move that service to online to survive, basically. But then what actually happened is, because we did do that effectively, and I was able to create a video case study, we then won loads more business. So the COVID year is actually our best year, because the unis were panicking. They weren't used to doing anything online. So we actually massively solved a problem. So not only did we keep all of the existing clients, but we won loads more. I mean, one sort of thing that I would give to that business was they had a team of software developers. So we were able to create our own online platform really quickly.
Okay.
Now, if I hadn't have sold the business, that would have been the challenging bit for me. I would have had to work out how would we do that without that knowledge. I mean, I know what I probably would have done. There was a company that owned that kind of software, but it would have been more expensive to do that. So that was helpful at that point in time. So anyway, the business did really well, but then I started realizing as we were coming out of the pandemic, just sort of when the restrictions were easing, just how much crap they'd basically told me to get the deal done in the first place. And
it's almost like you were getting wiser.
Yeah, totally. And I just felt like there was a huge clash of values around the way they did business and the way I did business, and they just weren't aligned, and I wasn't enjoying it. It was all about how much money can we squeeze out of clients, which was not something that I like. Yes, you've got to be commercial, make money, but not when you're compromising relationships. That felt uncomfortable. So I ended up having a big bust up with the main guy, and decided that I wanted to go. But it was quite painful because I'd done my earn out, although again, that was a hard, like, it's so much effort to get that, even though I'd qualified for it. So just everything was a challenge. And then I had most of the money from the deal was actually in shares that vested over 3 years, and I'd hit the 2-year point. So what I then did was pay the money to vest that set of shares, naively again assumed they would buy those shares from me so I could leave, and leave, in a nice way. And then they told me, oh, you can keep those shares and benefit from the future value of them, which I thought they wouldn't have a future value, and I didn't want to be associated with them anymore. So I just told them to shove it, which was financially.
Did you say shove it? Is that what you just said? I didn't quite hear the words.
Well, I probably didn't say shove it.
Okay.
Probably said something else.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
But I basically, it was financially, it wasn't the best move for me to leave all of that. But I just didn't want to work with them anymore. So
I want to take us back a little bit, because actually that was, there was some real raw learnings in there. And so often when we hear about people who've sold their business, I think for many of us who haven't been in that position, there's a belief that there's like an intentionality. And, I was almost thinking you were going to tell me, and then I decided that I was going to scale the business so that I could sell it. And actually, that's not what you said. But I think there's a couple of lessons in here. I feel like the first one is, you can clearly see by listening to you, it wasn't a win-win situation. It's a bit like when you price something wrong, and then or you price what you're offering too low, and then afterwards you're left feeling like, I'm having to deliver, but actually I wish I'd charge more. So like that's the feeling it's mirroring for me. Whose ear did you have at that time to get advice?
Well, this is part of the problem, in that I didn't know anyone that had sold a business. Like, I look back and I was so naive.
Also brave.
Well, not really. I think I was just a bit stupid because I didn't know any of this stuff. And I've always been one for saying yes to opportunities. And I saw this, as an opportunity. And I was just kind of figuring it out as we went along, really. And I would say it was just super naive. And I didn't have the business connections that I've got now. I didn't know very many people or anybody that had been through this scenario. So I did actually go and see a guy called Julian Layton, who had a big digital marketing agency in Newcastle called Orange Boss.
Okay.
And I really admired him. I used to see him speak at really big events and think, oh, he's really cool. Like he's quite very, very direct, very says it like it is. And I'd always been inspired when I'd seen him speak on stages and things. And I knew he'd sold his business and he was doing his earn out. So I went to see him to say, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And he said, is it F off money that you're going to get from this deal? And I said, well, not really, but it could be good further down the line with these options, which I then obviously didn't get to keep. And he said, well, you need to think really hard about it, because he'd sold to a really big company and he did not like being in that company to do his earn out. He really sort of resented being there, I think, because he was such a personality. So that was interesting, but obviously he hadn't gone through that whole process at the point where I saw him. So in hindsight, he was right in that, you know, think about it and all these things. But I only went to see him, you know, once for this coffee. And really, if I was to do it again, this is the thing. And when people ask me about this now, I say, go and get the best advisors possible. Get people, you know, don't just use your accountant that you've used for everything. Go and find an accountant that has worked with businesses that have scaled and sold. Go and speak to advisors and make sure that you're getting the best advice possible, because spending that money, you feel like you don't want to spend money on things like that, but actually it will get you the best deal in the end. And, you know, think about what you're going to do next. Think about all these different possible outcomes, because actually a lot of businesses that merge, or you know, businesses that acquire other businesses, it quite often doesn't go well. So you need to think this through and think about, well, how will I feel if this doesn't go the way that, you know, it is in my head? You've got to think these things through and speak to people.
Yet the Sophie that's speaking now is speaking with such knowledge and expertise about an area.
It was a learn.
Yeah, huge learn.
Huge learn.
And what did that change for you in terms of, once you got out of that, how did it go from, as you said, kind of, you know, you were working with universities and educational institutions, to Moja? What happened?
Yeah, clearly it's so different. So a couple of things. When you sell a business, you will have a ton of restrictions as to things that you can and can't do.
Okay.
So when I left that business, I wasn't allowed to work within that industry.
Right, it's like a competitor clause almost.
So it was one of 5,000 restrictions that I had. So I couldn't work in the industry for 9 months. I'd become a bit jaded with it in any case. I think it's quite a young person's industry overall, I think. And you needed a lot of energy for some of those events that we were doing. We were away from home for like weeks at a time at certain points in the year, which wasn't a huge amount. I mean, it was fun, but when you've got a family, you don't want to be away 4 or 5 nights a week, which is what we were doing for big periods of time. So it felt like a bit of a natural time to do something else in any case. And also I disliked this guy so much. I didn't want to have anything I didn't want to be then trying to compete with them
or be in that industry.
No, I'd had enough. So I went to see somebody who I really respect locally, who's got a big business, and I went to see her actually to get advice about getting out unscathed, because she'd exited a business, and I thought she'd give me some good advice. And she said, "Oh, what are you going to do next?" And I said, "Oh, I've got this idea." And I said to her, the thing that made that business really successful was when I became really well known in that industry.
I thought that as you said it.
Yeah. And you know, that was a blessing and a curse, wasn't it? Because this guy would never have found me, and I would never have sold my business to him if I hadn't have been so visible. But I was very visible. And it was things like that first book that then led to getting offered 2 TEDx talks. I got a column in a careers magazine. I got offered some TV stuff, some radio stuff. So there was this snowball effect of put myself out there and it leading to other opportunities. And at the back of my mind, I thought there's a really good idea there around doing that for other people and actually having some kind of process and framework around that.
And were you labelling it? Did you know that was around?
I didn't know what it was.
Visibility?
No. So I didn't really know what it was. And when I'd done it myself, it wasn't intentional. It was more like saying yes to stuff, figuring out how I was going to do it, because when I said yes to the TEDx talk, I didn't realise how actually terrifying they are, because I'd never even watched one. I just said, yeah, I'll do that. And then 8 months later, I'm doing it. But I didn't know what it was called. Even when I was talking to this woman about it, I said, I don't know what it is. Is it marketing? Is it PR? What is it? You know, some people would call it personal branding. I struggle a bit with that term, because I think when people talk about personal branding, they think it's, you know, some banging Instagram post or LinkedIn post that goes viral. And for me, the social media bit is literally the last bit of it. It's all the other stuff that goes around it, because a social media post, you know, I can do a post that does really well on LinkedIn, but you know, a couple of weeks later it's gone. You know, if someone's Googling you, your latest social media post might pop up, but you know, you've got to be constantly churning stuff out to have huge social posts. Actually, for me, it's the substance that sits behind that. So it is winning awards, it is books, it is speaking, it's all of these different things that I think create the substance. So that was where the idea sort of came from. The first year, we didn't really know what we were doing, because it was just an idea and we were trying to figure it out.
So you went into launching a business with... So Sophie, what was the bridge from selling that business, exiting, having worked there, to suddenly I now know you as the CEO and founder of Moja. Obviously, very different industries, because Moja is about helping senior execs and founders be more seen so they can have more opportunities. How did that happen?
So I was doing that for myself with the previous business. I just didn't realize what it was.
Okay.
I didn't know what it was called. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a plan. It was just saying yes to things and then amazing things happening as a result, and it's snowballing into other things. So, we did have a plan around awards. Mm-hmm. So we were winning lots of awards. I was winning lots of awards. I then did the first book. The first book led to 2 TEDx talk opportunities. I took the first one, just said, yes, yeah, I'll do that, figure it out.
And this is TEDx when everybody wasn't doing TEDx's.
Well, I'd never even watched one, which I'm really embarrassed about. I've watched loads now, but I had never even watched one at this point. And I just said, yeah, I'll do it, figure it out. I didn't realize that you have to normally pitch for them, and it's really competitive. So that was an amazing.
So you had been approached about the TEDx as well. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So really, really cool. And that was off the back of the book. I then got a column in a careers magazine. I was doing some stuff like TV, radio, all sorts of cool stuff was happening. So at the point where I knew that I was going to leave, exit the business that I'd sold, I went to see a woman who has got a very successful business locally, and I was chatting to her about it. And she said, well, what are you going to do next? And I was telling her that because of all the restrictions I had from the previous business, I knew I had to go into something different, and I was ready for something.
And so what kind of restrictions? Is it like a competitor clause?
Yeah, so you can't work, well, there was loads of different bits, but the key one was around not working within that industry for 9 months.
And is this quite normal? Is that what normally happens?
Yeah,
okay, it's useful to know. Yeah.
So that's normally, because they don't want you to sell your business and then go and set something up that competes.
Of course, yeah.
So I knew I had 9 months, and I thought, well, do I do nothing for 9 months and come back? And I just thought, I feel a bit tired now of that, and I wanted to do something else. So I had this idea that because I knew all of those activities made that business successful, because I was able to get better known within the industry, and it spotlights the business. It makes sales really easy to do, because when you rock up to a business development meeting, they know who you are, and it's just a nice
You suddenly discovered this whole thing that you were naturally brilliant at visibility.
Yeah, but without realizing what it actually was. So then I was telling this woman, I've got this idea where we could do that for other people. And she totally got it. I said, I don't know whether is it PR, is it marketing?
Yeah.
What is it? But it didn't really matter. I knew there was an idea there. So literally the day that I resigned from the previous business, that same night I registered Moja. We set it up with 3 members of staff, and that was over 3 years ago now.
Where did the name come from? I've been trying to work out what Moja means.
We get asked that quite a lot. So so I wanted to have a name that was kind of does what it says on the tin type thing. I can't remember what it was now. It was something about the profile builders or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're working with this marketing agency who I'd worked with through the previous business, because they had a very similar tale to mine, and that they were part of that business, and they had a disagreement with the founder as well, and similar story to me basically, and they left. So we ended up working with them to do the marketing for Moja, and they told us that the name was rubbish, and it was terrible, and it was restrictive, and it wasn't cool.
Interesting. Okay.
You're an edgy Manchester marketing agency, so tell us what is cool.
You must know. Yeah.
So they came up with a load of suggestions, and Moja was the one that stood out for us, and it has origins in various different languages of strong women.
Okay,
and
brilliant.
The original team were all women, and we're still mostly women now, although we've got one guy with us. But yeah, we just liked it. So,
and actually, it sounds really linear when you take it from the business you're in, because I was thinking, I can't see what happened. So in between this time, I know that you also were an angel investor. What did you know about angel investing at that time? And there's a theme here, Sophie. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't know anything about angel investing. So how did you go on to angel invest?
So that came about because I'd got to know Dan Priestley.
Yeah.
So I'd done the KPI program.
I was going to say how, so thank you for telling me that. Yeah.
2018, I think.
Okay.
And I'd got to know him, really loved that business.
Yeah.
And then what happened during the pandemic was he was advertising for some coaches to support the online version of that program. And I had all the criteria that he wanted to be a coach. And I was one of the coaches that he brought into the program. So and I still do that now. So it's a bit of a side hustle.
Okay.
It's something that I enjoy doing because it's working with really high energy, scaling up businesses essentially. But what that did is it got me into this community of really sort of big entrepreneurs, really, where I was being given access to opportunities that were coming up that wouldn't be talked about more generally. So one of those was ScoreApp, because Dan had gone into ScoreApp and he was raising, and he basically got in touch with a few of us and said, would you like to be an angel investor? Come along to this presentation. And if you want a masterclass in selling, he is very good at selling. So he does this presentation and says, right, buy in at this price. And the shares were quite expensive as well. And I was like, how has he persuaded me to do this? I didn't buy loads of them, but this was my first kind of dabble in this. And I was using the product, so I knew that it worked and it was good. And I know that Dan is so focused on growing and scaling that business that it would be a good move. And it's funny actually, because in my original KPI group, there's 4 of us that still meet for a Zoom coffee every Friday.
Wow, you're still so connected.
Yeah, and 3 out of the 4 of us invested, and the one that didn't gets so annoyed. We've had to set up a separate WhatsApp group just to talk about ScoreApp, because every time we get an investor update, it's saying that the company's worth a lot more, and he gets really annoyed. We've had to do that. But what that has done is it's made me understand, a lot more about angel investing. And obviously, at the point where I've sold the business and then left, I've understood investing and funding and fundraising a lot more in any case. So actually it's just been quite a natural learn. So now I'm at a point where I find it really, really interesting, and it's something that I want to do a lot more of. And actually we will have an event for ScoreUp, I reckon, within the next year. And that at that point, I would like to then make some future smaller investments, ideally in female-led businesses, because this is an area where you'll know probably the stats around how much money goes to female founders. It's going down.
And also how few there are, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's really bad. And and particularly in the Northeast, where we have fewest female founders. And I'd really like to then use that to do something locally.
I think what I love about your story is you've had some really big successes, yet although you it's almost like you shape like it's accidental, but there's some themes that I hear from you is that you're actually really brave at saying yes. Saying yes then opens up other doors to other rooms that you didn't even necessarily plan to go through. I think I've heard you talk about this in your own podcast, but you're very intentional. It sounds like you work with an intention for there to be an end result.
Yeah.
And you were talking about your TEDx, and I've watched it. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's absolutely brilliant. I love the beginning. The dress is fantastic. You'll need to watch it to know what I mean. You talk a lot about grit and determination, which clearly comes through. But if you were to almost be a third person here, you're looking at Sophie. What is it that Sophie does so brilliantly that has meant that she's had what, to me, feels like business adventures along the way?
Oh, gosh. It's hard to answer that about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I would say, I think I'm definitely a grafter. I do work really hard, but I enjoy it. So it's not hard work, if you know what I mean, if you're enjoying it. I think I'm very resilient.
Yeah.
I think I've had some challenging times. I'm still a single parent. Like, that is hard. That doesn't get any easier. It does in some ways, in that my daughter's 13 now, so she can do a lot of things herself. Not having to do all of the putting her to bed and all of that sort of stuff. But you have different challenges at different ages, and secondary school, and there's some sort of challenges within that. So I think that experience has been really, really, really hard. And I still get upset about it now because I feel sad that, you know, she's, you know, from a broken family. It sounds dramatic, but, you know, she doesn't have the same setup that a lot of her friends have, and she doesn't have a dad that's hugely present, and I feel sad about that, and I feel sad that I'm not always there as well. So I've got this constant sort of challenge around trying to show up more for her in where I can. So I always have that. But I think because I've had to provide everything for her, you know, I get very, very minimal contribution from her dad. And because I've had to do everything in terms of organising things for her, and, you know, just basic things like making sure that she's alive and keeping her well and things, it's made me very resilient, because I have had periods of time in my life where I've been so frustrated by that situation, and, you know, other things that have happened over the years as well. But there's no point in being like that. And, you know, people have told me just wasting energy if you're getting angry or whatever. So it'd be so easy to be bitter and angry about that, about the sale of the business, which, you know, was not a positive experience. Let's face it, overall it wasn't. But I'm able to now look back and go, well, there were some learns and there were some real positives within that, because there's no point in being angry and bitter about things, because it's like, what's that phrase about, you know, giving something about poison, isn't it? And you drink the poison and you expect the other person to die, or something like that, whatever it is. And it's kind of like that. So I try and be as upbeat as I can. And when I feel myself slipping a bit, because everyone feels their moods go, or you feel like you're burning out, and all these things are connected, I try and take positive action to change things around. So at the moment, you know, I'm really trying to be healthier. I'm trying to eat better. I'm trying to do exercise. I'm trying to do all sorts of well-being things, because I know that those things will make me feel better, and therefore, you know, more resilient and able to do all this stuff.
And what are the signs when it's too much? Because, you know, you've already admitted you're a grafter, you work hard.
Yeah.
What's the signs? When do you know that it's been a bit much?
When my sleep is impacted, because I love sleep.
Yeah.
I'm really good at sleep. I know all the things that you need to do to get a good sleep. Doesn't mean I always do them, but I could tell you what I would need to do to get a good sleep tonight.
Right.
So when I get to the point where I start waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning and then can't get back to sleep, I know I'm kind of on the turn. So I have to think about what is it that's going on, and what do I need to do.
Okay.
If I'm not get my steps in or doing some kind of exercise, I can feel that impact in my mood, or I'm starting to eat a load of rubbish and things like that. So those are the things, and I can start, you know, I start feeling it. You know, I've got good friends and colleagues that will tell me, you know, Rachel will tell me, you're looking a bit tired, or are you all right? And these sorts of things. And I think you've got to be, and maybe as you get older, you're probably, I think, better at being open about these things more around like, well, actually, this is how I'm feeling. And there's no point in putting a brave face on things. You've got to work out, like, who are the people that you could say things to. So, you know, if I was feeling under pressure or upset or stressed at work, you know, I wouldn't talk to all of the team about that, because you've got to, you know, be the leader and all those things, right? But then you know who it is that you can go to and who you can have those safe conversations with. But you've got to do something about it. I'm not a fan of just wallowing or letting things get worse. And, you know, maybe it is that you need a bit of time off or whatever. I mean, I haven't had, even though I've been away quite a bit this year, I hadn't actually had that much time off.
Personal time off. Yeah.
So that was a bit tough, although I had a bit of time off at Easter and then May half term. So I feel like quite fresh at the moment. So it's being able to identify those things and just be sensible about it. Or if, you know, you need to finish early one day or whatever and get to the gym or whatever it might be that you want to do, you've just got to do those things, because there's no point in being a martyr to things. And I think that is something that I do struggle a bit with generationally, because, like, I'm definitely feeling my age, because I come from that culture and that generation where you had to be the first one in the office and the last one to leave.
Yeah.
That's what people did.
And you keep going.
Yeah. So I think there's something around, like, you just never give up and you just keep at it. And I think I'll always be like that. And I do struggle quite a lot when, you know, the younger generations entering the workplace are very much about having more of that balance and that clearer definition and those boundaries. So I'm having to really learn and be open to that, because that's not something that feels natural to me. But yeah, there's a lot that can be learned from that, I think.
Thank you. Before we've got a few more questions, but there's actually one thing that I did want to ask you is, you've mentioned a few times that you've had team members. What have you had to do to be able to let go and trust somebody else to be in charge so that you can take time off? How has that worked?
I think hiring's a challenge, isn't it? Because when you're a small business, every person counts, and
costs.
Yeah. So you've got to get that right. I'm lucky that I've always had some people that have been within the team that I can rely on and depend on. Rachel in our team is one I've worked with for a long time, and we know each other very well. We've got very different strengths, and that they complement each other. When one of us is feeling under pressure, we used to always say that one of us would be feeling it and the other one was great because they would then scoop the other one up. But then well, it was until then we both started having it at the same time, and then that's a bit more challenging. But with a relationship like that, and we've got other people that support the business as well, being able to be really honest and open about those things, and being able to try where possible to support each other, and just have some of those open conversations about how people are feeling about things. I think that makes a really big difference. And we're at a point now where we're looking at how do we grow the business in a way that feels good for everybody. And again, it's then thinking about pinpointing what those next roles might be to take the pressure off in certain places, but be able to grow in a sustainable way.
Amazing. I have got a question to ask you. You are the only person I know with an MBE. So firstly, congratulations, Sophie. And I understand that was for services to business and education. What does that mean to you? I imagine you're going to be uncomfortable with this, but I still want to know what it means to you.
Well, I mean, it was amazing to get it. Like it was really, really cool. And we had like a party at the house when we could announce it. And Jess got on a coffee table and told our friends. So that was fun. And she got to come to Windsor Castle. I was totally unimpressed by being there.
When did you get your MBE?
So I got it. I was on the first list that King Charles had.
Okay.
So it was like the new year for 2024. So exciting. I got it December 2023.
Gosh.
But then because of the backlog of COVID, it was ages till I actually got to go and pick it up. So I think I got it in the September afterwards, which was quite nice.
Got it. What do you get?
So we get a scroll in the post, which was quite cool, from the castle. So that's quite funky. And then when you go, you get a medal. So I've got a medal in like a nice box and stuff. So that was cool. And I got to bring my mum and dad. So that was amazing because my parents don't go to stuff like that. That was such a big day for them, and it was amazing. So that was great. On a practical level,
what does it mean?
It's helpful.
Okay.
I think so. A lot of people locally who I knew of got in touch with me when that was announced and said, "Oh, we must go for a coffee," and it was because of that.
Okay.
It was because of that. And when I look at some of the opportunities that I've been given since, I can't say, it's definitely because of that, but I would say it's certainly helped. It has certainly helped because I do use it professionally. It's on my LinkedIn and my email and stuff. But I think kind of then you just forget about it, and then people ask you about it, and you're like, oh yeah, and you tell a story and stuff. But I think it gives you a certain level of credibility because it's something that you can't apply for it. It's something that you get given. It goes through a very robust process, which I've now learned about because I got invited to this brilliant reception down in London and met the committee that do all of this stuff and learned a bit more about it. And I just think it is that kind of credibility, that legitimacy. It's a certain sort of level of something. I mean, it's cool. It is cool. But, it goes back to then what do you do with it that actually is good? Because...
It goes back to your intentionality.
Yeah, I think so. So when I got it, I did say that I wanted to use it to try and spotlight the Northeast more. And whenever I'm at anything in London, I got to go to this brilliant reception about 6 months ago, which was the first ever reception that the Department for Business and Trade had done for honours recipients.
Okay.
And one of the first things I did was the head of the committee that judge these things or assess them. She did a brilliant speech, and I went up to her afterwards and I was like, I'm from Newcastle and there's never really that many people from the Northeast on the list. Like, how can we get more people from the region on the list? So it's not just a massive list of 95% of people from London. Like, it needs to be more regions, and I'm going to be fighting for Newcastle. and we had a really good chat about it, and we've stayed in touch since. So that is something that I would like to see a lot more of.
Yeah, it's been a brilliant. It's been so many brilliant learnings just listening to you. I remember at the very beginning, we've got a bit of a tradition here, which is we like to ask people some kind of questions around what you do when you're not in business. At the very beginning, you said one of the things you did was give up TV. So I'm curious to hear what your questions are. So I kind of thank you for just being so generous with all that you have shared. But also, I think there were so many learnings from it. And also from my perception of, oh, wow, here's Sophie MBE, who scaled and sold a business. And then I speak to you and it feels like it is something that so many of us could do if only we were braver and bolder with the moves. So if I kind of bring this back to just a little bit about you, Sophie, I would love to ask you some final questions, which are, what are you watching, if anything? What are you listening to? And what are you reading right now? And it doesn't have to be business related.
Okay. Watching. I said before, I don't watch much TV. So what I tend to do is every few weeks I'll go, right, I can't be bothered to do anything on a Sunday afternoon or something. And I'll go and try and find something on Netflix. And my friend came up from London last weekend or the weekend before, and we ended up binge watching this program. I can't even remember if I'm going to get the title right, but it's basically naked dating. Have you seen it?
I haven't, Sophie. Tell me more.
I hadn't. So it's either called Naked Dating or Dating Naked, something like that. And Rylan is the host.
Oh, yeah, I've seen some TikTok clips.
Oh, my God. So we just found that, and it's brilliant. You spend the first 10 minutes going, oh, my God, they've actually got no clothes on. So once you get over that, it's so good. So we watched the whole series across 2 days or something. And it's basically loads of young, gorgeous people with literally no clothes on who meet. It's a bit like Love Island, but naked. So Naked Love Island. And it was so interesting because they don't always go for what you might expect around sort of stereotypes, but it was fascinating watching how they interact with each other. And I really enjoyed it. But I mean, it's proper trash TV. So I watched that. And also I was a diehard Sex and the City fan back in the day. And the spin-off has just started up again. So yeah, we are into week 2 of that. So that's my treat. That's probably the one thing that I will actually watch every week. So I love that because it just feels like catching up with old friends when I watch that. It's a bit cheesy, but it's so good. What am I listening to? Well, I mean, I have excellent music taste. So I've always got some cool stuff on Spotify, although my daughter's got my Spotify password and she listens to stuff on it as well. So I'm also getting terrible suggestions now of weird young people's things. And I quite like old music. Podcast-wise, I'm really enjoying. Have you heard Eventful Lives? It's Dodge Woodall's podcast. I really like that. So I came across him at Ideas Fest last year. He's quite pally with Fran, who runs Ideas Fest, who I know. And he has people on his show that have had eventful lives. Comes out every Wednesday, so I'm quite committed to listening each week. I do prefer it when it's a business person, and he sometimes has gangsters and things. I'm less keen on those ones because I kind of feel like once you've heard one of those stories, they do feel quite similar. But I really enjoy the people that have got a very eventful story to tell, so I enjoy that. And I think he has a really lovely interview style, so that's nice. So listening to that and reading, I read on Kindle. So every night, that's my one thing. And that's probably what I've replaced TV with. I mean, I've always been an avid reader, but I would definitely choose to go to bed early and read rather than sit and watch TV because it's the thing that really grounds me when I'm watching TV. I'm on my phone at the same time, but when I'm in bed with my Kindle, you can't do that. So I think that's a really good thing to help me wind down. The problem is, though, that when you read books on Kindle, you never know. So I don't actually know what I'm reading right now. I'd have to go and look it up. But I do tend to go for very fast-paced, twisty type things. There's an author called Daniel Hurst who seems to churn books out every couple of months, and they are brilliant. They are really twisty and sometimes a little bit ridiculous with where they go, but massively good for pure escapism and to kind of keep you reading that bit longer. So that would be my reading exciting.
Thank you, Sophie. I've absolutely loved our conversation. I may be going to look at that Ryland show just to see what I think of it.
So good. Let me know.
Yeah, I will. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That was such a brilliant conversation with Sophie. If you've ever thought that the only way you can succeed in business is that you have to be somebody who has been a marketing expert for 20 years and you needed to have come into this business with the very intention that you were going to grow, scale and sell, then I think you're going to love Sophie's story, because she's someone I almost say it's almost like an accidental business success, yet there are so many stories that I think sometimes she doesn't even see the themes that come through, which is she's really focused. She loves what she does. She's intentional. And she teaches us a lot about saying yes, but also the power of saying no. So really enjoyable conversation. I think you're going to love this one. Thanks so much for listening to Don't Work Harder. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share. This show has been brought to you by Atomic, the home of epic business growth. Head to our website at atomic.site to hear more about our business programs and epic events.